for joining us. I'm Detective Inspector Fiona Bail, Head of Cyber and Innovation at the Eastern Cyber Resilience Centre. Today I'm speaking with an industry expert and one of the Eastern Cyber Resilience Centre's advisory group members, Professor Brock Rogers. Hi Brock, how are you doing? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the industry that you work in?
Yeah, of course, can. Yeah, with pleasure. So, as Fiona said, I'm Professor Brock Rogers. I'm currently Head of Cyber and Information Security for a large defence contractor. So we most probably have 25,000 people within the area I cover, and we look at all areas of cyber and information security, ranging from our supply chain to our infrastructure and to our relationships with other defence companies globally. Previously to that, I was Head of Resilience at HSBC, and then before that I was Head of Cyber for the Bank of England.
Wow. So you know your industry pretty well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we like to think so, but the problem is, one of the good things about this industry is it changes all the time. I mean, if you want to, it forces you to have these, to keep on top of it, because today's tack change tomorrow.
Excellent. So you said about your supply chain. Obviously, supply chain attacks have been in the news recently. Can you explain what a supply chain attack actually is?
Yeah, so I think so it'll be a supply chain attack, or sometimes it's called a value chain attack or a third-party attack. And it happens when someone looks to infiltrate your system through an outside partner or provider who has access to your systems or data. I mean, and I think it's dramatically changed the attack surfaces of businesses, especially as more and more suppliers and service providers have access to all our sensitive data, because that's the nature of how we work and how we do things now. I also think the risks associated with supply chain attack have never been higher. And I think due to new types of attack and growing public awareness of the threats, and increased oversight as well from regulators. And I think, a really good example of that, I know what details now, but if you look at the solar wind type attack.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned there about the risks. What actually are the risks then of a third party attack?
So I mean, I'd say one of the biggest ones is say ransomware type attack.
Okay.
And so ransomware is a form of malicious software, and that will look to encrypt your victim's files, and then the attacker will demand ransom money from you to restore your data, and then you're given instructions about how to pay a fee to get the decrypted keys, and the cost can range from a few £100s to millions, normally paid in some form of cryptocurrency. And a lot of the times now they will look to do that via the supply chain. So they'll look to compromise organisation X to get to organisation Y because they're perceived to be more vulnerable, but they have a unique relationship. And I think if you look at the Colonial Pipeline attack last month, very much via the supply chain, and that had the impact that parts of the eastern seaboard of the United States had worries about being able to get their oil. And then you saw one a few weeks afterwards where it was focused on the National Health Service within Southern Ireland.
Yeah, so obviously they're really quite impactful, and we've obviously seen an increase, definitely reported in the media. Do you think there's a general increase in the industry as well?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's really interesting thinking about this before we had our talk today. So I think if you strip it away, it's easy to say because it earns money, but I think it's all been facilitated by dark web. Suddenly you've got a place where criminals can discuss and share tools and techniques, which has progressed over time. I think you've now got a payment method. One of the biggest things of any type of cybercrime is at some point you've got to virtualize what it is. They've got cryptocurrencies. I think you've got the gap and the use of stolen government tools, and there's a whole load of stuff in the last 18 months, 2 years, where various agencies have lost some of their hacking tools and have made it to the underground. And then our dependency on data, and lots of it for everything that we do. And it becomes more and more critical. And then you have people pay. So what, considered a risk-free crime because people pay and they'll go for it that way.
You also mentioned about sort of people get their files encrypted, and I'm aware that before that sometimes they have that data exfiltration. I guess if you're working on proprietary software, that's actually quite a risk, no matter what size of business you are, actually having your data stolen from you.
Definitely. And if you look at data theft, I think I've got top of my head in excess of 45 to 50% are targeting small to medium enterprises. And I think we would, as a large buyer of services, we will keenly focus on our supply chain and the resilience they may have, because we don't want them to be a vulnerable into us. So I definitely think the small to medium business bit are probably the most at risk.
So what considerations does your business sort of look at when they're looking at working with a new supplier?
So we're looking for some form of formal accreditation. So am I confident that you've got you're going to look after what we want you to do, whether that's information, so can you protect the information when you give your or want you to work with us, or a product? Do you have a methodology that you can talk me through and go, actually we assure this way, whether you're going to use an ISO standard or a NIST standard? And then do you have the processes and the policies in place to show that you actually do that, and the right security culture where they buy into what you're trying to achieve? Because I think humans will always be the weakest link. We've often used the tagline, "You are first line of defence." I think so we'd be looking to see that as well, because if you're working on some sensitive proprietary things, a widget of some description, you want it protected, both physically and virtually, because once it's gone, it's gone. So I think, and that's becoming ever increasing important for us. And we've got a lot of work at the moment on how do we get better assurance amongst our third parties. And that's a range from small enterprise of 2 or 3 people all the way up to ones that would be nearly our size. And then how do we continue check it? Because I think big organisations are really, really good at the birth of a contract, and they're very, very good at the end of it. The bit in between, we need to be more of a mentor and husband something through, I think.
Okay. So is there any advice that you could give to a small or medium company that wants to work with others, not necessarily a big company, but sort of to protect themselves, I suppose, from a supply chain attack?
Yeah, I think there's some fundamental basics. I mean, people say it's basic cyber hygiene. If it was that basic, everyone would get it right. It's not, and it takes an effort and some costs involved with it. If you haven't got the size or the scope to do it yourself, get some external expertise in, and there's a range of options for that. I would go for a standard, say perhaps Cyber Essentials, or if you're slightly bigger, Cyber Essentials Plus, and then continue measure yourself against that, and then make sure you have good staff awareness, because as we've seen from the ransomware attacks, stuff like that, it always starts with some form of human interactions. And I think we see that continually. So, get yourself assessed. I think get some expertise if you don't have it yourself, and there's a range of support from organisations to help you do that. You can look at websites of resilience centres, you can look at the websites of the National Cybersecurity Centre, and there's lots of talk-through guides, and then keep yourself assured and keep yourself current.
Brilliant. So you're on the advisory group of the Eastern Cyber Resilience Centre. So would you recommend companies joining the centre, and if so, why?
I think it's brilliant, because I think it gives you, it's really easy to get narrow focus. I've been doing this for some time within the cyberspace, and it gives you a chance to, one, get help and guidance and access to expertise, which you perhaps wouldn't normally get, especially if you're in a different sector of a smaller size. But then also gives you that peer support. If somebody check, the people I sit on the panel with are from all different backgrounds and all different industries, but I know I can reach out to them, and doing this today, and it gives me a chance then to share mine. Because I think there's a moral obligation that this is not competitive. Good cybersecurity is not a competitive advantage, and things like the Resilience Centre gives you a chance to share that widely and make sure everybody comes up to a certain level.
That's really good. That's really interesting talking to you. Is there anything else that you think that our viewers should know about?
I just think I think going back to the other bit, choose something to give yourself a level of assurance. I think time and time again, when all the stuff we see is it's not negligence, it's just don't know. Find a standard, find a method of assurance, mark yourself against that, set the right culture so the organisation knows, and then you'll be fine. I mean, it's always going to be difficult. It's an asymmetric threat, and they change all the time. But I think those basic steps, and the Resilience Centres have guidance. NCSC have the 8 or 10 steps. Follow them.
Perfect. Thank you so much for talking with me. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure our viewers will think so too.
Brilliant. Thank you.